Good morning, Francois. Where does the interview find you?
Oh, ciao, Cesare. Well, this interview finds me in a pretty historical place. If you just go at the back of the garden and have a look on your left, you will see the old farm from the mother of René Descartes. And just 3 kilometers away, we have the battlefield of the Battle of Poitiers from 732. And nothing has changed since then. So it's pretty the heart of France. Very, very French, but yes, when you call François Bourdichon, you have to live in places like that.
Great. I love history, so Poitiers is something that I remember very well. It's fascinating. And so you're at home, so it's your home office. You have a wonderful background there, much better than mine. You know, it's just
Yeah, I did some cleaning before the interview, as you can imagine.
great. It's appropriate because Francois, you are a microbiologist, or I would say the microbiologist. Um, so you are an expert about everything that might be crawling and in our food and create problems. But tell us a bit more about your background, your job. What are you doing now? Okay, after this short presentation as the microbiologist.
Well, the microbiologists, I'm not so sure. Luckily, there are a lot of food safety microbiologists. That would be too much pressure if I would be the only one. I'm a food safety microbiologist from training from the Pasteur Institute some 20 years ago in the laboratory of Pascal Cossard on Lister monocytogenes, and I spent some 20 years in the food industry working with different major actors in the dairy and confectionery. And for the past 5 years, I followed my wife in the countryside, and I'm basically a food safety consultant working with different companies. I'm delegate of the International Dairy Federation since 2010. I'm presently the elected chair of the Standing Committee on Microbiological Hygiene. And because I did all of this, I had the luck to be able to be PhD student of Professor Morelli in Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, and I just made my PhD in my mid-40s. Pretty challenging, just 1 month before having our second daughter. So right now I'm a bit expecting some rest in 2022 because 2021 was a bit hectic.
I hear you. I have 2 kids as well, but I'm not doing any PhD, and good luck with that because it's challenging. Yeah. You look busy. Yeah, and I saw you are also in several international committee about food safety, microorganisms. So it's very interesting. That's why I call you the microbiologist. To say if I don't know something about those kind of pathogens, I will ask Francois. Okay, he's my reference guy for that. Yeah, I saw you work for a lot of years in the industry, in different industries, dairy, chocolate, so on and so forth. So you saw probably a lot of problems from different angles. But coming to the topic you are more technical, that you are working on, let's start from food safety culture. Because I would say that the basis of any food safety system or food safety in general is to have a company that has a certain way of working, a certain culture. From a couple of years in Europe, food safety culture entered into the legislation because we modified the hygiene package, the regulation 852/2004, with this reference to food safety culture. But can you tell us more about what it is, and if you think it's a real step forward, or we are just adding paperwork on the shelves, but it's just a matter of principles, but it's not something that will be applied in practical industrial environment in a practical way.
Well, per se, food safety culture, as we understanding today, is coming from a major initiative from a food safety person called Francois, who published a book some years ago mentioning behavioral food safety. Like food safety is not only science, not in fact, it's coming from your behavior. And then he used this approach of the food safety culture, where it has to be something embedded in the way you work. And you need to have the education and the training to develop this culture where food safety for you is something that you do without being aware of it, because that's part of your culture. And as you mentioned, Cesare, this is now in the European regulation, in the A52/2004, but initially this is also in the Codex Alimentarius Code of Food Hygiene. That is also written there in the recent update. You also already find it in some certification scheme like the BRC, and you expect that the others will follow. And my expectation from the food safety culture is pretty big. It means that food safety is really at the heart of the company, but to be at the heart of the company, the culture of the company per se must be fit for purpose as well. You cannot have food safety culture in a company which is only profit driven and does not have a look back on the employees, on the customers, on the environment. So it's a global scheme that has to be embedded in something compatible. And often when I visit factories and I go, people mention the first priority of the food company is the food safety. And I say, no, not per se. The first priority for me of a food company is, for like any other company, it's safety of the employees. Care for your employees. And once you care for your employees, you can ask them to care for what they are doing. Either they're making a car, or they're making glasses, or they're making, in our case, food. And this is where food cultures is important, because if you ask them to care for the food, you need to provide them the education and the training. Like you mentioned, I've been in many factories around the world, and of course I see mistakes. But I don't blame the people for making mistakes if I see that they are not aware of what they are doing. And sometimes they lack the training, they lack the education. And this is where people like me, food safety specialists, have to leave the ivory tower of corporate structure, of our clean office here, and go on the shop floor, discuss with the people, understand what they know, why they are doing wrong, and how you can show them to do things right in their own words. I mean, coming from Pasteur Institute, like you mentioned, people often say you're an expert, yeah, but that does not help me if I go to the factory and I need to discuss to people, and I need to have straight talk with them and to explain what you're doing is wrong. This is not on purpose, here what you should do. And I need also to find a solution for them, because often as food safety persons, as quality people tell us back from operation, from people on the shop floor, yeah, with people like you, we cannot work. Sometimes it's true, because we come with guidelines top down that do not make sense, that cannot be applied. So we need also some bottom up. In his book, Francois has mentioned food safety starts at the board. Well, food safety does not start at one place. It starts at different places. At the board, of course, you need senior management commitment. That's a paradigm. It's a non-negotiable, but also from the people, because the product is not safe because someone in his office decided so. The product is safe because people in the factory are trained, have the education, have the capacity to speak up if something goes wrong. And that's what we've seen in recent outbreaks, where we're mentioning that there were some whistleblowers that have to go externally, saying that something was wrong. This is not good. Everybody does mistakes. What is important is the way we react to this mistake, the capacity we have to see that there is a deviation, speak up with our colleagues, with our supervisors. Don't be blamed for the corporate because something is happening, but getting the support. So food safety culture for me, this is not KPI, this is not just something for the certification, it's a mindset that you need to have. And that's why I refer always, when it comes to food safety culture, to the initial expectation from Francois, behavior-based.
But being so behavioral, being such a mindset for safety culture can be really trained, because my understanding is that the first line of application of the food safety culture would be in HR, how we recruit people, how we onboard them, how we train them. But is that enough? I don't think so, because it's really complex to instill this mindset in people.
Well, culture per se are not done out of the blue and in one training that you do for 2 hours once every 2 years. It does not work this way. There is a lot of repetition. You need also to have people who are endorsed, who are recognized by their peers for being the person who knows, the person that can be contacted, that can be people that can maintain. So it's important not only to train everyone as required by some certification scheme to say every year for 2 hours we explain on food safety, you sign, you go, and up, that's done. No, you need to have people who are leading food safety culture on a daily basis. I'm very fan of the approach of you have in lean management called Genba, where reality happens. And that's important. That was the message I had in every corporate structure I've been. I say, if you haven't been for the past month, 2 months at maximum in a factory, and you do documents, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to go there. And going to the pilot, this is not going to a factory. A pilot does in 1 year what a factory does in a day. And the deadlines of corporate, this is 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. The deadline of a factory, it's 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 hour. So it goes very fast. It's like riding a wild horse, and you need to know what it means, and you need to provide support. And this is something that we have seen in the recent years with the COVID-19, that people could not go to the factory and that these people did not receive training. So there are a lot of discussion right now with virtual audit. Is it really better? Yes, it saves time, it is more efficient, we can do audits. I'm not a big fan of audits per se, because already this is based on the capacity of the auditor to have a look, to challenge everything. And because you pay the auditor, it cannot be too strict because you will go for another one. So this is always a balance. And this is why I'm more in favor of internal audit, of self-challenging rather than certification scheme that do help, but they don't make it all. And what we have seen recently with this COVID-19, that for 2 years, 3 years, with the lack of supervision in the factory, less people getting there, less physical inspection, less on-spot continuous amelioration checkpoints, less root cause analysis, and we end up in COVID-19 fatigue. And I'm not saying that this is fate, but from the recent outbreak we have seen recently, they were reasonably expectable because of COVID-19 fatigue, and that at some points, someone in the food chain will make a mistake. And the food chain is as strong as the weakest link. And what we have seen with some outbreaks related to major food business operators, this was an issue, even as transportation issue from one ingredient. So that's just a small mistake, but the consequences can be huge. So this is very important that this food safety culture is maintained on a daily, on a weekly basis, with people getting there, a lot of discussion, a lot of interaction, continuous amelioration. So we always say that plan, do, check, act from Deming. This is a bit old-fashioned, yes, but it works. So don't go for some fancy concept, which is very nice out of the blue. Stay with the basics. They work for a while. They just need some science, some updates, new knowledges, but per se, the discipline that is behind all this expectation, either from the Kaizen or from the PDCA circle, they still do apply.
Great points. I'll go back to the outbreaks in a minute, but it's interesting to extract some notes from your talk, because the bottom-up approach is very important. We all know in the sector that just using checklists and guidance and certification standards sometimes does not work. And the second very interesting point that you raise is that the fact that in an ideal situation, you don't need audits. You will do your own self-audits. If you build a strong culture and there is trust between management and people theoretically shall be free to raise the hand and say, guys, we have a problem to solve here. We did a mistake. We corrected what's happening and solve the problem. And that's the whole point for me of the food safety culture, because if you don't create this environment of trust and where the people speak and help each other, it's a nightmare. But it's the same in every office, also in a law firm like mine. It's the same. If there's no trust and cooperation between people, errors might happen and might go unnoticed. And that's very interesting also because we spoke a lot about this whistleblowing protection that we should offer to employees of the food industry when they want to denounce something. Also speaking of food frauds, that certain authorities grant protection to the whistleblowers. But the two things are strictly connected, in my opinion. The food safety culture might be something coming before the whistleblowers, and avoid the necessity to rely on whistleblowers to act. There is always.
Yeah. So when we speak about food safety culture, we make a big focus on the trust and the capacity for everyone to speak up of when something's going wrong. I think something important as well in the food business is the pride you have in your work. And if the food handlers have pride in what they are doing and they believe that they are doing things good, you have the highest chances that they were doing things safe as well if you train them properly. And this is something we have seen in the recent crisis. There were some internal informations coming from some factories and not from others. And this is one of my return of experience from this outbreak, is that everybody does mistake, but the way you react, the way you have your food handlers, your colleagues reacting, supporting what you're doing is very important. And this is where you see that specifically in these locations, you have a high food safety culture in place because people have the pride in what they are doing. They are standing for their job and they're standing for what they are doing. And this is very important. So food safety culture is really something that goes beyond food safety per se as well. And it's really a commitment, doing a good product, doing a safe product.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. If you have pride in what you are doing, if you work for a strong brand that is committed to produce safe food, if you have role models into the company, this will become natural. So
yeah,
it will help a lot. It's great. But coming back to the outbreaks, in the last couple of years, we saw a lot of big food recalls across the world, involving also, big corporation. Why is that? Do you think we had more controls? Do you think it's due to COVID? I don't think more controls, because as you mentioned, audits for a while have been suspended with problems with the restrictions coming from the pandemic. So what's the driver behind what's happening?
This is where I mentioned that food safety culture should not be a buzzword, and it should not be the tree hiding the forest. At the basis of food safety, and this is, you have all this codex documentation, this codex guidelines, and one of them very important is the FOWHO risk analysis framework, which also this guide is provided for food safety authorities. And you have a lot of people from the authorities who mentioned that risk assessments at the authorities. Well, guess what? Food factories, we have to do our own microbial risk assessment as well to take good management decision. And the point is, all the risk assessment we are doing is based on the data, on the knowledge we have on that day, and from the episodes from the colleagues that we have learned about. And it needs to be renewed because it's changing. The example I give always is that most of the factories, in the food factories, most of them were built before 1983. And in 1983, we discovered that this interesting laboratory bug called Listeria monocytogenes could cause food poisoning, and was a major issue for the food industry. And for the past 40 years, we have worked gathering more knowledge on this bug and understanding that, yeah, this is something we need to improve. You have the control measures, look in the environment, pasteurization does not make it all, and all this stuff. Salmonella is the same. Salmonella is known for almost at the start of microbiology in the 19th century, but we had we rediscovered in the 70s, in the 80s, that in low moisture food, you could have salmonella. The first salmonella chocolate-related outbreaks was in 74 in Canada. In the mid 80s, we had a lot of data coming from the Netherlands about contamination salmonella in powder milk, but already you find publication from the 60s from Australia mentioning that in dry environment you find salmonella. So this is also a pitfall of humanity we are prone to forget. So you always need to come back to look at the science, understand what's going on, make the redaction, make sure that the knowledge is kept. As you mentioned, I'm a microbiologist, but I'm not the only one. Every time I go in the support of a factory, of a company, I want to know who's my point of contact, who's the microbiologist. And when you start with a micro problem in a factory and they don't have a microbiologist, or at least someone who's a referent for microbiology, you know it's going to be more difficult. And they can have all the indicator you want in food safety culture, in certification, and accreditation of the lab. If they don't have reference, if they don't have people who make the internal challenge, who recently checked from outbreaks from our colleagues in the same field, could it happen to us? Did we challenge ourselves internally? So internal challenge is very important to make sure that the decision we have taken was based on science, which is still valid. And this is why even myself, I will say, this morning I just attended another webinar on the bug, which is not my favorite one, just to listen what's going on. We need continuous training from the referent as well. It has to be embedded, the learning process from the referent as well, because if we train, who's training us? And this is where microbial risk assessment comes with science, with continuous update, with a lot of reading. Personally, I spend around 35% of my time reading, looking at new information, challenging what I know. As a French, challenging my knowledge is not embedded in my way of working, but still I need to do it. So it's always asking yourself, is it still valid? What's going on? Should I renew? Are the management decision making real lot of sense? Am I testing the right criteria at the right place? Never take things for granted. And every time you see some companies or some private sectors going from some arrogance, mentioning that, yeah, we are the safest, and this is where the outbreaks happen. So food safety is really linked to a lot of humility. Again, not helping where you're French, to really step down and really challenging continuously, not challenging for the sake of challenging, of course, but making sure, okay, is it really robust? And that's always the point, is what if? Often people ask me and they come, we found this, what should we do? And my feedback is always, why did you test? And if you test, two options, the one you want, the one you does not want, and be ready for two. Because you should not test and cross the finger, it's going to be all right. Something happens, I call François. No, you already need to know, you need to have a plan, because whatever you're out of deviation, it end up in a crisis. And crisis management start with crisis preparedness. It's not in the middle of crisis that you ask the question, what should you do? When the crisis arrives, you already have the emergency plan. And that's what you need to build before.
Totally agree from a crisis management perspective. So you can summarize also saying that it's not just ticking the boxes when you do a microbial risk assessment, but it's, you have to adapt to circumstances. You have to look for unknowns. You have to challenge your knowledge, as mentioned. You have to be prepared for surprises.
It's not black and white. It's not black and white. Every time I got to questions, often say, what do you think about this? Should we do this or not? And I say, well, it depends. My counterpart, they always make fun of me with this, because I always start with, it depends. Because I don't have a one size fits all. If I would have a one size fits all model, I will sell it and be amazingly rich. I'm not. It means I don't have this one size fits all. I'm not aware that anyone has it. So it's really, you need to adapt, come with your knowledge, come with open eye. And that's why also external challenging is interesting, because you come with a fresh pair of eyes and you look at things differently. And most of the time when you arrive in a factory, you do not know, you see things based on what you have seen in many other locations that people even do not see anymore or were not aware of. And it's very challenging, whatever the company, to receive a fresh pair of new eyes who comes with what you think first are naive questions. And after a while, it's not naive questions, it's really painful questions, because you're like, well, I should have asked this. Well, I don't have the answer. Wow, and yeah, he's right. What has happened? What are we going to do? So this is complicated, and it requires a capacity of stepping back, cool down, reflect, and be ready for the challenges. Blissful are the ignorant. So when you come and you say, and you're aware that you have a huge Damocles sword on top of your head, two options, you expect that you're going to be promoted before the sword comes down, but at some point it will come down. So the best thing, if you are really committed to your company, is to say, okay, I've got an issue, I need to report, and here's what we need to do. What are the mitigation points that we can put in force?
Yeah. If you don't test, you don't know. If you test, you have to be prepared to react. And I absolutely agree. And it's incredible sometimes how many months or weeks do you need to find the source of a problem along the supply chain. As mentioned, I managed so many cases of food recalls where it was really hard to understand where it was the problem. I remember also very well-known cases of Listeria or Salmonella that were dwelling in a facility, but nobody knew exactly where. So we are very focused on products, I would say, in the EU legislation. From my perspective as a lawyer, the US legislation is much more focused on the environment. But when you have a salmonella or listeria in the environment, might be even worse, because you have to do tampons, you have to look everywhere. It's not so easy to eradicate the endosperm pathogens. In my experience as a lawyer, okay, I just see things at the end of the of the crisis often, but it's unbelievable the risk to which companies are exposed if they fly blind when it comes to microbial risk assessment, because you might find surprises. And I don't know if you had experience of similar cases, but I remember cases of Listeria salmonella staying in a facility for like 20 years unnoticed, and somewhere in a
it's always the risk of don't tell, don't ask, and this is where at least for big companies, it's important to let factories pick up. I've been in corporate positions where you work with factories, and if they find a listeria, you put them a red card. This is not good, and from the start, I know that it was not the right approach, and you need to say to a company that find listeria in its environment, good job, you find it, not let's do something about it and need to report, and let's make a case study that we can share with the colleagues. And this requires in the global corporate companies really a good communication between factories, no competitions, and the capacity to say, okay, I messed up, because it happens, but here is what I've done, here is my mitigation plan, my corrective action, and please share with everyone. And this is important, that if you don't do anything, of course you're not doing anything wrong, but if you do something, at some point you will make mistakes, and we need to give the right for mistake, as we know, errare humanum est, sed diabolicum perseverare. So making a mistake once, that's okay. Doing the same mistakes and not reacting, that's not good. Earlier last year we had a discussion, a panel discussion, what is a good environment monitoring program. And you have this approach that people were mentioning, and if I don't find anything, everything is under control. No, if you don't find anything per se, you might have nothing to see, but there are highest chance you're not looking where you should. A good monitoring program, whatever it's toxicology or chemistry, is you find something, you make the root cause, and you have the mitigation action in place. The food industry is generating a lot and a lot and a lot of data. We are now speaking of food industry 4.0, where we put everything digital. That's fine. We are digitalizing everything, but whenever you test, this is based on a management decision, which means that it will require an action after. And if you have all your data getting in one, then you need also the capacity to analyze this data. Because if you have everything accumulating, but you don't do anything about it, what's the point? Stop losing money about it. And it's also important, if you want to make good decision, you need to enter good data. And that's one of the issues I see a lot of with food digitalization, is that people go too fast in the digitalization. But digitalization means there is something to digitalize. And to have something digitalized, you need to also have this, again, microbial risk assessment in place. What am I testing for? Do I have the right method? Is it a method I can trust? And then I gather data, and then I can make good decision. Because if you have bad data, you have bad decisions. That's GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So it's really important to have a good process in place, and be ready for whatever will happen, and just don't expect that everything is under control, and if everything goes wrong, you put on the button and someone will come and find the solution. That's not the way it works.
And which are the main breakthroughs, the main application of technology and digitalization to risk assessment? I read about predictive risk assessment tools, that kind of stuff. What are you working on? What's boiling,
so
in the sector?
In the world, it's artificial intelligence, and I always like to say that artificial intelligence does not exist. It's just our intelligence we put on a computer to go faster. And there you have a lot of companies who are working in support of food companies to gather data and to make some analysis, to make a decision out of it. That's one of the good points, because as I mentioned myself, to get trained, I spend a lot of time reading and so on. Let's be honest, people in the factory, they don't have time for this, they have too much on their plates. So they need a support, they need something that does make sense, that will help them for decision making. That's the first point. Then the point, it's not me, but that's a colleague of mine, Martin Wigman from Cornell University. He mentioned what's important is the time to decision. When it goes from analytics, we often pick of time to results. In microbiology, we have culture-based methods. For Listeria, for Savencia, it's 5 to 7 days. We have fast methods. In a shift, in 24 hours, you get the results. Great. But if it takes time to have the results, read the report, go to the right person, and you win 3 days in the analytical workflow, but you lose 20 hours or even 2, 3, 4 hours in the decision-making process, this is not helping. This is where digitalization will help. Once the data is there, it can go directly to the right person who's trained, who know what to do, who can report. So it's not a revolution in the process, it's a revolution in the timing of the process, where you can do this in a very timely manner, react very fast, and then you can be more efficient, more proactive for the decision making, to block the production, because you don't decide out of the blue to stop the factory, and you need to be pretty sure when you go to your people and say, okay guys, you are 400, I'm alone, we shut the factory, we need to reflect. This is not the way it works. You need to come with data, you need to come with a good dossier to say, okay people, we have something going on here, let's stop and let's clean and let's destroy and let's have a look at the raw materials and so on. So all this way of using better the data will be more efficient for fast track reaction. And that's something highly expected. If I mention in France, we have a new article in our law specific to this member states, Article 50 of the Loi Egalim law, who mentioned that if we have a deviation in the monitoring, which can have an impact on the general health of the target population, we need to inform as soon as possible the authorities of the positive and of the corrective action plan. The as soon as possible is not mentioned 24 hours, 48 hours, but it's true it's not 2 weeks or 1 week. So, and if you go to the authorities explaining that something's wrong in your factory, you have to be pretty robust, because there is high chances you would be under supervision. Eventually, you will be out of business by the time you recover. So if you make a mistakes in your communication and you react, or you're overreacting, well, it's not going to work. But you need to get the support, because if people are afraid of losing their job, they won't take any decision. So it's a balance. And for me, really capitalizing on the data, making sure that I have everything there to reflect. I got the support from the corporate, from external structure, or even for the authorities. It's very important in food safety to have good relationship with the authorities. You have to have the mindset that they are here to help. If you think that authorities are only here to blame, this is wrong. This is not going in the good direction. I mean, your job is to protect your company and making sure it delivers safe product. Their job is to deliver the general population, which are your consumer. So basically, we should work together.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, and this goes both ways. Also, the authorities should not, always act as they are, sheriffs, but if they help adopt a proactive approach to solve problems, they will find much more cooperation from the industry. And timing is everything. Timing is everything. Coming back to our crisis, you cannot imagine how many times clients call me saying, "Oh, we have this problem. We process this raw material before testing arrives." So every time we find a positive, the raw material has been already processed and the food has been sold. And at that point, you have no way out. You have to do a food recall. Usually it's huge because your raw material that was at high risk has been spread all over, I don't know, 10 lots of production. And it's a nightmare. I always thought it was a bit of an excuse, because if you test, why you are not, waiting for the result. But I understand also that there is a lot of pressure on the supply chain from clients to supply products for products. But this factor of timing is very important. Yeah, if you can give solutions to decide, take the decision quickly.
Well,
It would be much better.
It depends.
It depends.
No, there is a very interesting guide from ELC Europe from the late 90s, written by Mike van Schotters, who was from Nestlé, who mentioned that you need to consider if you don't have any heat treatment in your process, you need to consider the raw materials are critical, which means that it's easier said than done, but as soon as you use them, you have to be sure that they are not going to be an issue later on, which means that at least it's not testing, because testing per se are always the limits, and we know that testing in microbiology, either for the raw materials or for the finished product, is limited to the capacity of sampling. And if you want to be sure that everything is safe, you have to test everything, and then you don't have anything to produce. So it comes in supplier management. It's come in educating the chain upstream, and that's something that people need to have in mind, that their responsibility is not only from the factory down to the consumer, is also from the factory up to the suppliers, making sure that they are doing the job right. We have a very clear example right now, and for once, I'm not going to speak about microbiology, but about allergen with Celia Marsh. So that's in UK, they mentioned the people. I'm not a big fan, but they mentioned this case that this lady hit a yogurt in a catering chain, and she had an anaphylactic shock. And in fact, everybody say, yeah, but I thought it was on, I thought it was on, I thought it was on. Well, my point is always very clear. When it comes to food safety, never assume. Never assume. Check. And checking takes time. And checking does not mean testing and going to the lab. Testing means I receive this milk powder that I'm going to use. Which factory does it come from? Well, I don't know. We check with brokers. No. I want to know which factory. I want to go to this factory. I want to have a look. I want to see the surrounding. What's the drying tower? And then I will decide I can use this milk powder or not. But the COA, I see often people mentioning, we do not understand, we use this, but we had a COA that was mentioning. Well, guess what? In microbiology, a negative will never see means that there is nothing here. And that's something we changed in the EU regulation in 29 from absence presence to detected non-detected. It just seems to be wording, but in microbiology, this is a huge change, because it means for people, it's not because you don't find anything that there is nothing. It just means that you are you have a reasonable probability to be below a maximum level of default, but you still have something. So it always comes down to never assuming, challenging again, and only challenging yourself, but changing everything that enter your factory.
It's great advice. I would say you speak a lot of factories, but are you going a lot to factories? How's the situation now in France? Do you have still a restriction for COVID? You are going back to a normal. Here, in Italy, it's quite okay. I'm visiting clients all the time again, but the last couple of years, I traveled the world for 10 years now. I was grounded completely.
Yeah, basically, and that's funny said in English. I might say I'm grounded for now. I'm grounded. I stay on the ground, but I'm so grounded I'm punished by my wife. No, but seriously, I'm going less to factory than I used before, and this is not linked to COVID. This is due to the little creature that make a nice cartoon here, and you don't see here, but there are a lot of toys all around here. So, no, I'm never go as much as factories as I would like to, because this is very challenging, very interesting, and this is also why I'm very happy with this job for the past 5 years, because I've been in many places where we can discuss with operation, where people it's funny because when you discuss with these people, they say, oh, thank you, we learned so much from you, and I always say, no, I learned from you as well, and they say, oh, you say it to be polite. No, it's true. Please if any of my clients is listening to me, and when I go to factories and I send the people to factories, I really, really mean it. When I started in the food industry some years ago, not to mention the number, my boss, Yves Didier, came to me and mentioned, François, you come from the Pasteur Institute, you come from École Normale, you believe you are intelligent, you might be intelligent, but if you go to food factories, these people, they have their own intelligence, and you need to respect them, and you need to be listening to them, and have in mind that you come, you make the fun guy for a few hours, and then you leave, and they are the one doing the job. So pay your respect for that, and that's something I always keep in mind when I go into factories. These people, they are the one who are doing my food. So it's not only that side they need to respect me. No, I need to respect them as well. I need to trust them, and I need to do my best to train them. And that's really my advice I will give to, let's say, corporate experts or people like us, like this white collar. Have in mind that the blue collars are the one delivering. And for this, they really need our respect and our support.
It's yeah, great advice, because in my experience it was the same. François. I was a lawyer coming out from a law firm. I started my own business, and I learned everything from my clients. I never refused to visit a facility, to do a tour in a processing plants, and I learned so many things. It's unbelievable, and I love those machines and those organizations that work and flow so smoothly. It's amazing. Okay, but besides the babies that I am empathetic with, because they have two, so now I'm much more relaxed after COVID, because I can work also from home, and it's not a problem if they pop up during a call. Now it's socially accepted. What are your future plans? Do you have anything, any new projects, something that you want to share with us for your future career, your next months?
No, my future plans basically, and is
to keep us safe.
No, keeping with my last term of chair of the standing committee on microbiological hygiene. Okay. I really have the chance to get the support from my peers at the IDF for the past 4 years, and we worked a lot. I have 2 more years, or they have 2 more years to be with me, and we hope to do a lot. We have started with UNICAT European project. We are already working on the calls of others. So I think we have what we call a recovery plan in Europe, and the budget for science is pretty huge. We have very, very high challenge coming on top of us. I mean, we've discussed today food safety, but the core issue is food sovereignty that we need to track back. It's really important. I work a lot with startup plant-based company, and they are very surprised to discover how political or regulated food is. And I always explain them, but guess what? Without food, a system, a political system, no matter how rich it is, will last no more than 2 weeks. And this is why food per se is really something important. And this is also why this type of product needs to come with a nice history, that they need to be appealing to me, because food is really something that we are all committed to, because we all eat every day. And I don't have any expectation to change this job in the next 30 years until I retire, if it ever exists. Food business is really, really interesting. Working with the primary production is something I would like to do a little bit more, because I work a lot with the transformation, a bit with the primary production, but these are also very interesting people. We have this new challenge coming in France, with most of the farmers are going to retire, and we need to have a new generation coming. Maybe Victor and Camille will be farmers. I don't know. We'll check. But this is really interesting challenge we have on top of us. We have cell-based food. We have precise fermentation. We have high-quality products in Europe, around the world. So I think we have a very important challenge for us. Like mentioned by the FAO, WHO, we need to find the capacity to feed the world population, and I'm trying to do my part.
Yeah. That's great. We should have another chat on all this evolution, precision, fermentation, cell-based food. It's something very interesting. And I was speaking about that yesterday to a Chinese audience, by the way, and about this tension between old agriculture and the need of these new technologies to jump in and help us feed the world, and the role of technology. And so it's such a hot topic. Maybe when you finish your PhD, you have more time, we'll do another talk. But you gave a lot of great advice to our listeners. Any last remark, word of wisdom for young professionals? Anything you want to say?
Train yourself. Train yourself, and always challenge yourself.
Constantly. I would have. Great. So thank you very much for your time, François. I appreciate you.
Grazie, Cesare.
And your Italian and Latin is amazing.
Yeah, my Italian is limited. I got a lot of critics from Lorenzo and the team at UNICAT that I need to improve. I'm trying to. Maybe moving to Italy will be the solution. We need to think about that.
No, use Latin. It was amazing. Yeah. Thank you, François.
Ok.
Have a
Ciao,
good day.
ciao a
Ciao,
tutti.
ciao. Bye bye.
Ciao.